Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, it's our pleasure to have with us tonight Sheikh Suleiman Hani. He is one of my teachers. He's an instructor at Al-Maghrib Institute. He's someone who memorized the Quran, mashallah, in 10 months. He actually has a book on methodologies, steps and ways of memorizing the Quran. It's a pretty good book, alhamdulillah. If you guys get a chance, you guys can check it out, maybe on Amazon. He is someone that has obtained many ijazat in the books of hadith, alhamdulillah. So we're very honored to have him with us. He's currently pursuing a second master's at Harvard University, a very prestigious university, as you guys all know. So we're very, very honored and pleased to have someone of his stature with us today. And we're looking forward to his topic. He's talking about cell phone addictions. And pretty much every single one of us probably checked our cell phones like 5 times between when I started and right now, at least. So inshallah, we will love to hear from him and get some advice from him, inshallah. So we'll get started. Jazakumullah khair.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man walah. اللهم بك أمسينا وبك أصبحنا وبك نحيا وبك نموت وإليك المصير أمسينا وأمسى الملك لله رب العالمين اللهم إنا نسألك خير هذه الليلة فتحها ونصرها ونورها وبركتها وهداها ونعوذ بك من شر ما فيها وشر ما بعدها. This is the only time I think it would be awkward if somebody's phone went off during this lecture. But more importantly, your phone can go off, but more importantly, it would be awkward if we were on our phones during the lecture. Now, I say this very humbly and gently because the lecture is about smartphone addiction. So, first question and the most important question here tonight. How many people here have iPhone? May Allah guide you all to Android. Allahumma ameen. You can say ameen to that dua. That's just a joke, by the way. I gave a lecture a few years ago at a conference, and I think there were more than 1,200 or 1,500 people. It was a massive hall. And it was about smartphone addictions. It was the same topic. And actually, the one who recommended this topic tonight had attended that talk. Somebody came up to me after the talk, and he was extremely angry. His face was red, and he was upset, and he's yelling at me, "You should never give another lecture on any minbar again." I'm like, "I'm so sorry, brother. What did I say?" You know, I'm very cautious with my words. So did I say something offensive? Can you correct me? Advise me. Like, don't yell at me. He's like, "You cannot make fun of Apple, fun of iPhone." I said, "Why?" It was just a joke. I made fun of Android, made fun of iPhone. He's like, "No, I work for Apple." I said, "MashaAllah." So this guy deserves a promotion, mashallah. Just as a reminder, if I make fun of a phone, it's just a joke. So please take it very lightly. Interesting question based on a survey. So I'd like to ask, how many times a day, because the brother actually just mentioned it, how many times a day do you think you check your smartphone? For people here with smartphones, how many times a day do you think you check your smartphone, on average? Anyone? 100? 700? 60? That's very, very humble, mashallah. If you say 60, I assume it's not a smartphone. I'm kidding. So the reason I ask this question is because some surveys show, and we are not aware, some surveys show, switch them up. Some surveys show that on average, most smartphone users check their phones about 150 times a day. Now, this sounds like a large number, but we don't notice how many times we check our phones, right? You can download apps and you can actually change some settings. So you are aware and tracking how many times a day do you just look at your phone? How many times a day do you unlock it to see the time, a WhatsApp notification, to see if there is even a notification, to see if there are any calls or apps or text or Fortnite or Candy Crush or whatever you use your phone for? 150 times is the average, and that was 3 years ago. Now most people are probably checking it more, wallahu alam. In the last 20, 30 years, it's amazing to see the evolution of phones. Does anybody here know when the first cell phone call was made, approximately? Anyone remember? I wasn't born, but it was all over the news. So it was in 1973, and the one who made the call, it was basically Motorola company. They made the call to Bell Labs. Bell Labs is the company, the phone company, that went out of business. And the very first phone to make that call weighed about 2.5 pounds. You can imagine like holding a brick to your ear and trying to make a call, and you're calling your rival, your competitor, and telling them, hey, the first call worked. This is the very first phone. Fast forward 15, 20 years in 1996, 1998, you have the Nokia phones that probably everyone here has used before. They're like unbreakable, mashallah. You can drop it on the ground and it will break the ground instead of breaking the phone. And people are playing, the most advanced thing you can play on there was Snake. You guys remember the game Snake? So phones developed very quickly. And then we saw in the early 2000s the evolution of the so-called smartphone. Now these phones are no longer phones. Because if I ask right now, I hope and I think we will be able to come up with at least 20 things very quickly that smartphones have replaced. What are some things smartphones have replaced? What is it? Calendars, absolutely. What is it? Clocks, yeah, you no longer need a clock or a watch. Notes, excellent, so you don't need a notepad. Cameras. Banks, you have apps. The whole app world, there was a whole other discussion. You have access to so many things through these apps, right? Phones have replaced, now you have GPS, so you have navigation system in your phone, you don't need an atlas. I assume many people, when we used to take road trips, you had this big atlas in the car, for the highways and the routes. Phones have replaced so many things that they've become a necessity in our daily lives. In some ways, this is an amazing thing, and it's a huge blessing. But if we're not careful, it could also be very damaging according to a lot of studies. And the way it could be damaging is in our use of the phone, our perspective on what it means to us. So when we talk about the impact, we're going to talk about 5 things, inshallah, just to keep it straightforward. When we talk about the impact, every one of us will perhaps have a different reaction to each of these impacts. No doubt some people will find that some of these you've overcome or are irrelevant. And for others, you might find you are struggling with some of these to a magnified degree. So the first of these 5 impacts we'll talk about is the impact on the mind. So a lot of studies, recent studies have shown that the replacement of all of these different things and the increase in our usage of phones every single day, on average for 3 hours a day, a culmination of 3 hours a day, has caused our minds to become cluttered. And when I say cluttered, it's because of the constant interruptions. If you are not careful with something as straightforward as open or limitless interruptions, then it will have an impact on our ability to focus. And this affects us in our work, it affects us as Muslims in our salah, it affects us in our endurance to listen to a lecture, and so on and so forth. So our minds become cluttered. And an example, somebody might be running, let's say they're running a mile around their block, and as they're running, they're checking their phone, they're checking the time, they got a notification, they got a call, and they're not putting some kind of filter. They're not having some kind of methodology. And it sounds weird to say we should have a methodology, but if we don't, then it will have the impact that these studies are showing in recent years. And if we're not careful, then our children, as they grow up, their minds will develop with this as a standard, rather than being impacted as a byproduct of phones. This becomes the standard inability to focus. And in fact, now more than ever in history, we have an increase in short attention spans. And this is for a number of causes. A lot of psychologists and researchers say part of it is our limitless use of smartphones in our daily lives. The second is the impact of control. Knowing that you own your phone and it does not own you. And when I say owning your phone and it not owning you, the reality is, think about what your phone means to you. Your smartphone, right? We're talking here only about smartphones. Think about what it means to you if you lost it. If you left the house without it, and you're somebody who takes it every single day, everywhere you go, that first moment you realize around the block that your phone is not in the car, what do most people do? They go back home for their phones. That moment you're outside of the house and you lose your phone, your heart drops. And we all have that friend who they're panicking and they're looking for their phone and their phone is in their hand, like, where's my phone? And they're freaking out. Our phones have so much control over our lives. And that is because of the number of things that they have replaced, as well as our dependency on them. Sometimes, as technology evolves and we take advantage of its blessings, alhamdulillah, we don't realize how dependent we become upon them. We don't realize that you can no longer tell somebody directions without giving them, the WhatsApp location or a GPS location. You can't tell them take 3 blocks left and 2 blocks around and take a loop around the funny looking tree to cross the yard from. They're like, what are you talking about? Just give me the address. We can no longer find ourselves independent from these things in most cases. And of course, I don't speak for everyone. How many people here have lost a smartphone or had it stolen before? Just out of curiosity. Anyone? 1 person, 2 people? What was the first feeling like when it was lost or stolen? What is it? Panic. Excellent. Depression. I won't say excellent, but that's understandable. Anyone else? Had your phone stolen or lost? Yes? How did it feel the first moment you recognized it was lost or stolen? So mad, subhanAllah. And the reason is that it's not just the phone. There are several reasons. First, the sensitive data that you have on your phone. Second, the value of phones has increased significantly. Now phones cost more than many other things people have. Somebody might be, in terms of economic definition of poverty, somebody might be living in poverty and have a very nice smartphone, right? It just becomes a part of everyday life, especially in the Western, or actually all across the world. Phones have become so expensive and they have such a strong impact in terms of marketing that you find some people who get, sucked into this, cult-like mentality of buying certain brands like iPhone. They're waiting around the corner for that new phone and they don't know why. And we're being very blunt here. Forget iPhone, any example. When you see people doing that, they did an interesting experiment several times. They would go to people waiting in line who have, let's say, phone number 9 and phone number 10 comes out. They're waiting in line for this new phone 1 year after they just bought a $1,000 phone. $1,000 for a phone? Why? They're waiting in line, somebody comes up to them with the same exact phone that they own. And they just, they reformat it, they put a nice different case on it, and they're like, hey, did you see the new phone? What do you think about the new phone? Number 10. So they look at it like, wow, this is lighter, and it's faster, and the camera's nicer. It's the same phone that you have. Why do we see an increase in the value or the cost of smartphones in parallel to other things in society in terms of consumerism? It's become a way of life for us to think that the next big thing will make us happy. If I buy this, I will be happy. If I buy this, it's prestige, or I will be perceived in a certain way at work or in front of friends. The reality is, if we get into this habit of consumerism, we will find it will have an impact on the heart. Because you buy a brand new phone and 2 or 3 months later, the other company just announced their brand new phone and it's onwards. Consumerism does not make people happy. And this is based on what we're seeing around the world today. And the more consumeristic we find ourselves in terms of buying things to make ourselves happy, the more we realize that these things don't give people happiness. And so the value of phones also make it another reason to panic. The idea of communication, not being able to talk to people, losing everything of information, losing everything of your daily companion. For some people, their phone is more of a companion than their husband or their wife or their children or their parents. It's become their everything. For some people, it's become a way to kill a lot of time. And it's dangerous in that way. Despite all of the benefits and resources and lectures and Quran apps and hadith and benefits you can take from having a phone and just basic communication, they are also tools to completely waste people's times if we are not careful, if we don't have some kind of filter in our lives. And most importantly, we find that for many people, alhamdulillah, we assume that the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. So having a smartphone in general, I think we all agree, is better than not having a smartphone. If you are one of those people who's allowing your smartphone to really wreck your life, it's affecting your productivity, it's affecting your happiness, it's affecting just the way you live life, and so on and so forth, then things should change. But it does not necessitate the removal of phones, the removal of something in an extreme fashion. Nobody would advocate for something like that. Rather, the things we have, we control. The same way when we say, the Prophet ﷺ told the man who asked for advice, لا تغضب, translated as, do not become angry. The advice is, it's not don't ever have anger, because anger is still there, right? You'll still have anger when people cause you to be angry. It's discipline your anger, control your anger. Things will exist at times that we need in life or a part of life. Instead of trying to go to an extreme by removing the entire thing or assuming that it's possible, we try to moderate how we use it. We try to discipline how it's being used. So a lot of studies, and this is sad, but this is very important. A lot of studies recently are showing a rise in depression, and one of these factors is the usage of smartphones. How it's being used. How it's being used with social media, feeling connected to the world, feeling dependent on phones, feeling dependent on having an internet connection, where some people get on the plane and, especially internationally, and they're like, how am I gonna live for 10 hours without internet? And I'm like, what are you talking about? You've lived your entire life before internet came out without internet. They're like, no, but I need to be connected to people. I said, talk to the person next to you. You're on a plane for 10 hours. It's okay. It's not that big of a deal. But when we feel like our phones are things we cannot let go of and that we cannot control when we use them, then we know that there's a problem that requires some kind of resolution. Speaking of phones getting lost or stolen, about 10 years ago, I went for Umrah with a family member. And as we were getting off the bus right next to the Haram in front of the hotel, we're getting off the bus, and for some reason we got off at an earlier stop. So I quickly got off and I left my phone, and this is one of the earliest smartphones. I left my phone on the tray in front of me on the bus. I don't know how it happened because I'm usually very cautious. I didn't find out until 30 minutes walking distance later. I got to the hotel, I unpacked, my phone is not here. My family member is like, well, check your bag, it's probably in your bag. I'm like, no, I'm positive it's not in my bag, it's not in my pocket, my phone is not here. And I panicked, where's my phone? This is more than 10 years ago. Where's my phone? It's so expensive, I have everything on it. What did I do? I ran back to the bus stop. And it was a 30-minute distance in terms of walking. I ran the entire way back. And then the iqamah time went off at the masjid. This is Masjid al-Haram, right? 100,000 times for every prayer. And as I'm running towards the bus stop, which is very close to the masjid, I'm thinking, do I have to stop for the adhan and the iqamah and pray where I am, or do I go get my phone? Because in Islam, you're supposed to defend your property, you're supposed to protect your things, and that's actually one of the permissible reasons to leave a prayer, let alone delay the starting of a prayer. So I decided, let me make dua as I'm running, and I decided I'm just gonna go get my phone. So I run, I get to the bus stop. They tell me the bus driver is not there. You have to wait until he gets back. So I stand there and the iqamah goes off and people are praying. You know how it is in the haram, everywhere. So I start praying where I am, and a group of people were there. And I waited next to the bus stop, and I'm making so much dua in my sujood. Like, I just want my phone back. When do you make dua for your phone? Like, why would you? When you lose something worldly and you start making a lot of dua, then you realize the power of dua. And that's problematic. I made so much passionate dua, and I waited next to the bus stop for a while, and eventually the bus driver comes back. So I tell him, I left my phone on the bus. He says, no. I says, what do you mean, no? He's like, no, nothing on bus. I said, what do you mean nothing on bus? Let me go check my seat. He's like, no phone. I said, I know my phone is here. I'm positive I left it on the bus. I just used it on the bus. I got off and it wasn't with me. So it's on the bus. He says, no, sorry. So I'm like, is he stealing the phone? What's going on here? And I was about to leave and I was about to give up, and I decided, you know what? I have to be cautious and not naive. So I said, I know my phone is on the bus because it has GPS tracking on it. And it does. I didn't use it, but it does. I didn't feel very ethical saying that, but the guy got scared and he said, hold on, let me check one more time. He goes back on the bus and he's like, don't get on the bus, I'll check for you, which I found weird. He gets on the bus, he comes back, he's like, okay, go check your seat. I said, okay. I go check my seat, and oh, subhanAllah, my phone is there. It's under the carpet of the seat, which is impossible unless you put it there, right? I realized that the guy had tried to steal the phone. Now for me at that time, the phone was everything. And for many people, if you utilize your phone and everything is there and it's not backed up and it's your everything, then it becomes problematic. One of my mentors in time management, he said one of the greatest things successful people do to be productive, because we have so many things going on in our 24/7, is to have dedicated times to respond to certain types of messages. And one of the best things that I've done in my life, and I'm so grateful that I did this, I wish I did it sooner, was that I disabled notifications on any type of social media app. So whether it's Snapchat or Facebook or even WhatsApp, I disabled notifications. Why? Because I'll check them at my time. If there's something urgent, somebody will call you. If it's life or death, somebody will call 911 or will call you, hopefully 911 first. It's not going to be something that urgent that you have to keep checking and interrupting your flow of thoughts. And we don't want to affect our mental health. Why? Because when we talk about the importance of health in Islam, it's not just physical health and it's not just spiritual health, it's our mental health as well. And one of the ways to do that is to avoid the things that psychological studies show are causing harm to our mental development or to our intellect in general. How many people, when you wake up in the first 15 minutes, sometime in the first 15 minutes, you check your smartphone? I'll raise my hand, I'll be honest. Most people don't, or half the people don't. Okay, now more hands are going up, mashallah. 85% of people who responded to a survey with hundreds of thousands of responses, more than 85% of people said in the first 10 to 15 minutes of waking up, they would check their smartphones. Now, some people, dangerously, throughout the night, they're waking up and they're checking their phones. Did I get a notification? Did I get a call? Did I get a like and a follow? This is not really healthy. One of the youth in our masjid comes into the masjid, he has a bruise on his forehead. You want to know how he got the bruise? He's like, I browse my phone as I'm falling asleep, even if I'm tired, and I can't sleep unless I'm using my phone all night. And when I finally fall asleep, I'll fall asleep. So one night he's on his phone and it's in front of him, he falls asleep and the phone hits his forehead. It bruised him. It was a heavy phone, mashallah. So again, the second point is with regards to the importance of knowing the control that they could have on our lives and being a little more aware. Number 3 is the effect on relationships. Some people don't think this is a thing, but look at the studies in sociology and psychology. People are becoming more reserved and individualistic because of smartphone usage, habits, patterns, certain ways of using phones. They're texting in the rooms next to each other. If you have a house, you've probably had an experience where somebody upstairs texts somebody who is downstairs, like, are you home? What's going on? Come upstairs. We've become so accustomed to it. You can have people in the same room. We can have a halaqah, and if we took a 10-minute break sitting down in that room or with our families, at one point or another, perhaps everyone's on their phone. Do you agree that this has become common? It's become very common. And in fact, if you want to raise awareness to your own family, wait till everyone's on their phone while socializing and take a video of everyone on their phone and send it to them, and they'll notice before they look up. Send it to them as a reminder. Hey, we're here together. Let's connect in person. Because it affects the way people communicate. It causes people not to be able to handle one another when conversations and conflicts arise. This is why more youth and more of the upcoming generations are struggling to really socialize. And when we say socialize, we mean be able to handle relationships and conversations on the same level as previous generations because of the dependency on being secluded behind a screen. So while we use these phones to socialize and text and communicate, no doubt, we need to also make sure that it's not over-encompassing with other things in our family lives. Make sure people are talking, cherishing their parents while they're still alive, cherishing their spouses while they're there, cherishing your children while they're still at a certain age or phase in their lives. One father said, when he wants to gather the family, he disconnects the Wi-Fi router. So what happens? When the router goes off, eventually somebody in the family comes to the living room, wherever the router is, and they ask, like, what happened to the internet, right? And then another child would come in like, hey, the internet went out. And the first one's like, yeah, I just came to check. And the dad's sitting in the living room. He's like, welcome to the family gathering. I've been waiting for you guys. Like, this is what it took for the internet to go out. So we need to make sure that the phones are also not impacting us when we are with other people. And as an advice to myself and to all the people here whose parents are alive, it is part of birrul walidain, righteousness and honoring of one's parents and even one's elders in general. That if you're in a conversation with your parents and they're talking to you, don't you dare look down at your phone. It's not respectful. Even if they say, it's cool, I'm chill, I'm a cool parent, while somebody is talking to you, especially a parent, show them respect by giving them attention. And if they look away or they're being casual or they're also distracted, that's not a big deal. But in general, if you're not aware, try to be more cautious around your parents or around the elders. This is one of the etiquettes of birrul walidain, wallahu a'lam. And number 4, in general, and I'm sorry, but I have to bring this up, one of the biggest impacts of smartphone usage is the number of deaths and fatalities because of texting and driving. Now, to some people, this might sound silly for me to be sitting here and bringing this up or raising awareness. The number of people who are dying because of using their cell phones while driving is now, in the last few years, higher than the number of fatalities due to drunk driving, which previously was the highest cause of fatalities and car accidents, alcohol-related accidents. Now, in terms of fatalities, it's smartphone usage. Now, I hope, if you have not before, I hope everyone will, if you're somebody who texts and drives, because I've done it before many times, I'm not gonna lie, and I'm assuming most people here have as well, or have looked quickly at your phone while driving, or thought to yourself, I can do it, right? I'm not somebody else. These are other people or other cases. It could happen to anybody. Wallahi, it could happen to anybody. And the question is a text message worth more than your life? And if you're texting somebody who is driving, then I believe you are partially responsible for their usage of their phone at that time. If you know someone's driving and texting you, don't text them back. Say, don't text me until you arrive to a red light or until you get to your destination. Because your life is worth more than looking down for 2 seconds. It can wait. If it's an emergency, you can call. And at least with calling, you can visually see what's ahead of you. Even that is not advised, and it's illegal in some states. When we talk about texting and driving, we have examples. I know some people here are like, why are you talking about this? It's very, very, very common. It's so common that actually it's more rare to find someone who refuses to look at their phone while driving, meaning as a way of life. You have the example in 2012 of a teenager who's driving, and as they're driving, they're posting a Facebook status. So they write something along the lines of, I don't want to misquote it, but they wrote, driving and Facebooking is not safe, ha ha. This was their last message. And as they're posting this, they ended up, the car in front of them suddenly stopped, and this is how quick it happens. Suddenly stopped, they hit the car, I believe it was a truck, and they died. A young man who just got his license is driving, and he's texting his friends, I'll see you soon, I'll be right there. And as he's finishing the text with the last 4 characters, the acronym, talk to you soon, TTYS, he types T and he types the second T, and then something happens, he rolls over on the side of the highway, he dies in the car, and his phone basically is there as clear evidence. When the police saw it, they said it's very obvious he was texting right before he rolled over, right before this accident. The parents ended up sharing that text message to raise more awareness and to remind people, it's not worth your life. If it's urgent, call. If it's not urgent, wait. Or pull over if it's that important. It's not worth looking down at the phone or looking away for 2 seconds, because anything can happen in that time. And Allah gave us this amana, this life that we have, and the life of the people in your car and the other cars around you. It's an amana that as Muslims, we actually realize and we acknowledge in terms of the principles of Sharia, the preservation of life is one of the most important things. And if something could endanger that, then we have to raise awareness about it as much as possible. I know for some people, this might sound redundant or it might not be significant to you, but wallahi, it is very important to address, and especially, for the younger audience, make sure this is not a habit you ever accept in your life. Make sure this is something that if you see somebody texting and driving, you warn them not to do that. If somebody's driving the car that you're in, tell them, hey, while I'm in the car with you, please don't text and drive. Just while I'm in the car with you, please don't text and drive. One of the funny things that I heard, a 7-year-old, she was 6 years old actually, in a halaqah, like they were little kids were basically talking, and we're talking about not texting and driving to the adults. So one of the little kids, she's like, my dad does that all the time. It's like, my dad, I tell him to stop and he does not listen. And so like the father is there and he's like, stop. She's like, no, I tell you to stop and you don't listen. See, the sheikh said you can't text and drive. I'm like, it's not just me. Everyone says don't text and drive. He's like, no, no, no. The way I do it is different. I look at the phone and I'm looking at the street. I look at the phone, look at the street. I said, everyone thinks they're safe. Everyone thinks it's not them. 1 second, one moment of really getting sucked into or absorbed by your text or whatever you're doing can be all the difference between life and death. And if your children are in the car, it's an amana. Wallahi, it's an amana. He's like, I'm never going to do it again. And alhamdulillah, as far as we know, he's never done it again. Right? The kid stopped complaining. So one of the solutions to this, if you think you have a problem with this, and you say, I know I'm going to do it sometimes, I advise you tonight, if you get a chance, go on YouTube or Google News, and you can find a lot of videos of accidents of people who are texting and driving. Why do I say that? Because sometimes the theory or the advice is not enough. Seeing the harm it could cause is something completely different. So I advise parents, children, old, young, anybody who thinks this is something they do, to try to watch a video or try to read about it, because it is a very dangerous thing. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from that. And number 5, one of the most important issues with smartphones in general and smartphone addictions is, and this is addressed to the parents, no doubt. I think most parents are aware by now, and if not, this is simply another reminder. You cannot simply give a child a smart device and let them use it with no limitations or restrictions or guidelines. That is not advised from any angle whatsoever. The amount of dangerous things that they have access to are numerous and countless, and I think everyone is aware. If we give our children these types of limitless boundaries, and we think this is in the name of freedom, or this is in the name of cool parenting, or whatever it might be, that's not the reality. So even some of the most cool parents that I know, some of the most chill parents that I know, while they're raising their kids, they're giving them these devices with conditions, and as they grow older, a little more trust and a little more responsibility. There are some, sorry, not even children, young men and women, 16, 17, 18 years old. To this day, with their parents, they have an arrangement. Jazakallah khairan for the lights. They have an arrangement. At the end of the day, at a specific time, all smart devices, electronics, go into the parents' room, plug them into the chargers, and leave them there for the night. There's no way you should allow any child to be alone in the room all night with access to the internet on a smart device. And that's for a number of reasons. If you're not aware of the issues that are happening in society, the predatory issues, the images that people are seeing, the videos people are watching, the immoral things that are posted, the doubts and shubuhat, the access to a lot of haram, the interactions between people through different types of social platforms and Snapchat and Instagram, you have to be aware. And we cannot just throw something out there and say, my child is smart enough. Then in that case, why not give them the freedom to do whatever they want when it comes to eating and drinking? We tell our children, no, too much junk food is not good for you. Too much of anything is not good for you. And sometimes we have to guide them as they're growing older. And this might look like restrictive parenting, but in reality, it's agreements. So you have 30 minutes to use this device, like this amount of time. You have an hour to use this. At a very, very young age, they should not have their own devices. And I'm sorry to say this as if it's objective. It is my opinion, no doubt. But this is based on the youth that we're seeing coming up to us with problems in later years. This is based on the parents who come to us. This is based on the kid who in the qiyam, in the masjid, was watching something when nobody was watching. Why are we not thinking about the other side of these devices and the access that they give to our children? It is a double-edged sword, no doubt. And I don't encourage something that's extreme or restrictive, but be very cautious. We have to be very cautious because sometimes people who are younger will not make the best decisions for themselves, and we all know this. And as we grow older, we grow wiser, we look back and we say, perhaps this should have been done with different boundaries, different guidelines, different restrictions. Wallahu a'lam. If any child under the age of like 10 or 11 owns a smartphone and they have like a password and they have access to things that their parents cannot monitor, and there are no restrictions, family restrictions, because there are things you can restrict on your devices, there are apps you can use to monitor things, there has to be a level of trust, but it depends on the child. It depends on their age, depends on your understanding with them, right? This is something I'm letting you borrow, and you're using it, but with guidelines. And if you break one of these rules, and I have access and I can see some of the things that you have access to, if you're doing something wrong with it, then you are not entitled to it. This is the gist of it. And as they grow older, we give them more responsibility and more trust. They make mistakes, we help them rebuild that trust. We don't basically destroy it for the rest of their lives. But we have to also be very, very cautious. Wallahu alam. There are a lot of dangerous things out there. There are a lot of youth, there are a lot of people who use these phones and some of these apps in very inappropriate ways. For parents, if you don't know what some of these apps are, you have to be aware. You have to read for 5-10 minutes online. What are some of the apps that parents should be aware about, that children are using? And I'm not saying this to sound like the guy who's messing up like your plans if you're a youth, but if you're not doing anything wrong, then there's nothing to hide from one's parents. I'm not talking about private communications with friends, but in general, if there's nothing to hide in terms of the apps that you use, then there's nothing embarrassing about opening up our phones to our parents, our family members, and so on and so forth. Having said that, no doubt, I think all of us acknowledge the benefits, alhamdulillah, of phones in our lives. If you check your phone 100 times, 150 times a day, maybe every time you check it, you'll make dhikr. Maybe every time you check it, the wallpaper says, remember to say La ilaha illallah, or you have an app that reminds you to make dhikr. So use the phone that you have to bring you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We can use this technology in so many beneficial ways. You can call people for birrul walidain and silat rahim. You can call friends just to say salam, how are you doing? I'm just checking up on you. We have people who call us, and when they call us, we think, why is this person calling? What do they want? And that's problematic. We should get in the norm of calling people who might have needed that call that day. A friend you haven't spoken to in years. Now you have the technology to do it all across the world with no excuse. Let us use these devices creatively to bring ourselves to an accumulation of good deeds that we'll be proud of on the Day of Judgment. Oh Allah, when you allowed us to exist in a century in which technology manifested itself in this way, I utilized all the good that it brought about. I utilize it for Quran apps. I utilize it to listen to the Quran. I utilize it to communicate with people for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I utilize it to connect. I utilize it to share on social media beneficial reminders. And when I die, I hope people will still see these beneficial reminders. We have so much at our fingertips, so much access, so many resources, and it's important for us to always look at these things as an opportunity to progress. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us amongst those who are always using the things that He gave us in beneficial ways. Again, to repeat the 5 things that we spoke about. Number 5, going backwards. Number 5 was the danger, the potential, danger for adults and for our children in using electronic devices. Number 4 was texting and driving. Please, I hope that if you are somebody who texts and drives, that after this lecture you will at least reconsider strongly ever doing that, or at least being a lot more cautious with what you do in terms of driving and texting. Number 3 is the interactions. So giving more value to talking to one another, looking at one another in our eyes, looking at people, communicating with family, in the family living room, in the house, talking, gathering, socializing, and not becoming so disconnected because of texting and because of phones. Number 2 was the issue of control. Make sure you do not feel overly dependent on your phone. Rather, you feel that you are in control of it. And that if something happens, قَدَّرَ اللَّهُ مَا شَاءَ فَعَلَ, and لَا سَمَحَ اللَّهُ, then you are not like basically destroyed in your life. You are taking precautions with how you use it. And then number 1, be careful of the psychological impact on one's mind, on one's intellectual development, on one's ability to focus. You find now studies show people cannot read entire articles anymore. Now they just skim. And there's an overload of information. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to use these devices and all devices and technologies in beneficial ways, and to grant us the good of these things, and to protect us from all of their harms and all of their evils, and to make us amongst those who benefit others with the way that we utilize technology. Wallahu a'lam, wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Is it time for Isha, or do we have time for a few questions? Are there any questions? Or rather than questions, I prefer, since I just blabbered on for a good 45 minutes, anybody have any comments and insight? Because there's a lot more to this discussion. This is taken from a 6-hour workshop, actually. So there's a lot more to say. So if anybody has comments to add as advice, this is a perfect opportunity, inshallah. That's a very general question. How can we make good use of a cell phone? So I gave some examples at the end. Utilize it for any kind of ibadah, to bring you closer to Allah, to remind you, right? If you're somebody who forgets a lot, and many of us do, Put reminders in your phone. Use reminders for everything. Use to-do lists, productivity apps. Use the countdown timer to see where your time is going. There's so many different apps we can use. Just don't use iPhone. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding, man. You guys are like, what? Just a joke. Forgive me. Anybody else? Questions, comments, or concerns? Yes. Excellent question, Jazakallah khairan. Phones have Quran apps. Let's talk just about the Quran because that's the main question. Is it permissible to take a phone, a smartphone, because it has a Quran app on it? Is it permissible to take it into a bathroom or prohibited places? The scholars say the app that you have is not the Mus'haf. These are light pixels, and as soon as you close the app, it's no longer there. And so many other arguments can be made. If somebody says it's prohibited, it becomes problematic. Why? If you say because it's stored in the phone, that requires its own fiqh breakdown, the Quran is also stored in our hearts when we memorize it. Are you not allowed to enter, the bathroom with Quran memorized? Of course, this is not an issue. So it's the same with phones, wallahu a'lam. It is permissible, wallahu a'lam, to take phones wherever you want because these are apps and these are light pixels. This is not the Mus'haf. In general, of course, we would advise don't have the Quran, like an actual page of the Quran on your screen in a place that is prohibited, but having it stored as, zeros and ones, binaries, is not a problem at all, wallahu a'lam. Jazakallah khairan, it's a very good question. In the back. Can you raise your voice? I still didn't. Can somebody relay the question? How many people tried to contradict? Which statement about the Quran in the bathroom? So how many? For what? Counter arguments for which point? I encourage you to ask. Don't be shy. So, okay, maybe a general question would be, how many of these things are subjective? All of them, right? Except the studies that I referenced. A lot of these things are subjective. How you use any technology, no doubt, and some of the issues I mentioned about parenting, as I said before, it's different from person to person, right? So some of us here might actually need to use our phones for a lot more work than other people. But in general, all the advices that we gave are based on psychological studies. Why? Because we don't want to take things that are very specific to small groups of people, rather what affects the majority of smartphone users and how we can avoid those things, wallahu a'lam. But yeah, there are subjective views. As the parent or as the child? So from what angle? So how do you come to an agreement with parents in terms of smartphone usage? Discussion, negotiation, right? Everyone will ask for something. Somebody will say 2 hours, somebody will be like, no, give me 3 hours. Somebody will be like, let me keep my phone till 11 p.m. because I'm still awake. Somebody will be like, no, 8 p.m. So it really depends on the parents. There's no one specific way to do it. Every single circumstance will vary from person to person, family to family. And if I say otherwise, then I would be saying something very problematic, right? But in general, open communication and trust is extremely important. Because if a child or a parent, they don't feel like they can trust the other in that agreement, it's going to cause problems in any relationship. Wallahu a'lam. So trust and transparency and honesty. If somebody makes a mistake, one of my favorite examples, a parent said, my child came to me and said, I made a mistake. You told me to put my phone away at 8 o'clock in the room, and I actually took it back out and I was playing, what was it, Fortnite. You guys know Fortnite? Okay. Yes, you're laughing, alhamdulillah. They're playing Fortnite for like a good 3-4 hours and their parents are asleep. And then they snuck back in later and put the phone back. So they felt bad, they felt guilty. They went and told the parent. The parent says, I appreciate your honesty and the fact that you came and actually admitted it. Obviously, I'm not just gonna let you off the hook. There's still a consequence for that. But because you're honest about it, we have a greater understanding going forward. Because you're honest about it. When you make mistakes, I will be more understanding. We all make mistakes. But every case is different. Right? And so there's no one blanket answer to agreements, but it's based on expressive communication, trust, honesty, and transparency. Wallahu a'lam. Sure. Well, here's a funny thing. You said there has to be compromise on both sides. I don't know if your parents are here. Oh, okay. MashaAllah. So it's a funny question. Why? Because if you're the parent, you're like, I don't have to compromise anything, right? I'm the parents. I dictate and I'm giving you the phone. But as I said before to all parents, as the children get older, you have to, as we were all, growing up in those teenage years, you have to give them a little more, flexibility, a little more trust, a little more responsibility. And sometimes they will make mistakes. And we learn in life through our mistakes, no doubt. But in terms of compromise, of course, it should be on both sides. Parents should listen to what the child is saying, or the young man or woman. Listen to what they have to say. Listen to their argument. Perhaps, try it out. Consider what they're saying. Again, in the end, it's going to go back to the parents. Because birrul walidain in Islam trumps is a very weird adjective to use now. It prioritizes birrul walidain over the usage or the entitlement to a phone, if we're being very frank. But parents should be understanding. Parents should be understanding in this country, in this day and age, be very understanding. It's extremely difficult for most, 16, 17, 18 and up not to have a cell phone. And you have some younger kids. I saw a 4-year-old the other day with a phone. I'm like, who's that phone for? Like, this is my phone. And they're playing a game on there. And I'm like, how do you have a phone? I had genuinely thought, somebody lost it. The parent said, I got the new iPhone, so I gave my 4-year-old the old iPhone. I said, MashaAllah. So, compromise, absolutely. Allahu Akbar. Yes. So we're jumping into fiqh, which I don't mind. I love fiqh. Can you read Quran off your phone without wudu? First, there's a general question, and this is a fiqh question, so there are different opinions. That's the first disclaimer. The second, can you recite Quran without wudu? The opinion that I follow, and the overwhelming majority of scholars, is that yes, you can recite Quran without wudu. But the question is the app on your phone, is a Quran app on an electronic device considered like the mushaf, the printed mushaf? So the majority of contemporary scholars, because this is a contemporary issue, they say no. And this is in alignment and agreement with the other question about taking it into the bathroom. If it was a mushaf, then we have a lot of other rulings. So some scholars say it does not require wudu if you're reciting from your phone or an electronic device. Wallahu a'lam. This is the fiqh opinion that I follow, but I acknowledge and I mentioned there are other fiqh opinions, and Allah knows best. Any other questions, comments, concerns? App checking for parents? Okay. Okay, so just as a reminder, you can download different types of apps that track how many times a day you unlock your phone. So you'll know how many times a day you unlocked your phone. So if we said 150 today, some of you might go home and the next week you'll find out it's actually like 300 or 400. That's okay. Or not, I don't know. It depends on what you're doing, but be very cautious. Wallahu a'lam. So on, I don't know what the app is called. On the iOS market and on Android market, Google Play, you can just type in specific things you're looking for, like phone tracker or time tracker or time usage or unlock usage. You'll find many different apps. Wallahu a'lam. Wallahu a'lam. Somebody here had their hand up. Yes. Messaging during the khutbah time, the khatib or the people in the khutbah. Both would be kind of weird, but for the khatib, it's a whole other issue. For the people who are attending the khutbah, playing with rocks in accordance with the authentic hadith was prohibited, meaning it affects the reward you're going to get for your khutbah. It will remove that part of the salah, which instead of 4 rak'ahs of dhuhr, you're praying 2 rak'ahs in salat al-jumu'ah, and you have the khutbah you're supposed to listen to with attention. So even playing with pebbles and the sand and the rocks was considered or mentioned by the Prophet ﷺ to avoid, let alone texting people, right? So you're not supposed to be talking, texting, and so on and so forth. Some scholars, this is in the Hanbali madhab, some scholars will say that if somebody sent a text message, it's not the same as talking. It will remove and reduce the reward significantly, like playing or doing anything. But they said it's not the same ruling as talking, which is also something the Prophet ﷺ warned about. All of these things we should not be doing in the khutbah. There should not be any interaction. There should be complete focus on the khutbah during that time. And this is, for many people, this is the main thing that they hear every week. So try to give it your full attention. Wallahu a'lam. Great reminder, Jazakallah khairan. Initially, I thought you were asking if the khatib is texting in the khutbah. I was going to be like, it's kind of weird. Multitasking, that's very good. Yes. Is it good for kids to use electronic devices? You know, some smartphone, I don't want to mention names, but some inventors of specific devices, likely tablets, they wouldn't allow their own children at a young age to use these devices for more than, let's say, 30 or 60 minutes at a specific time. Why? They found in many studies that it's having an impact on psychological development. It has an impact on the development of the brain. Now, it depends on what you're doing. It depends on what you're doing. Watching a lot of videos in general, adults and children, and the impact is worse for children. Watching a lot of videos with moving images is not good for the development of the brain. And so at a younger age, I would say the time should definitely be limited. But if it's being used for other things like books or the Quran or Quran app or a game every now and then, it's not a big deal, right? But be careful with the usage of time. Wallahu a'lam. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Yes. In salah. So the brother mentioned some people in salah will check who it is and like listen, like they'll answer and they'll listen. I've seen so many crazy things. I have not seen somebody answer in the salah itself and be like, hey, I'm praying. If that happens, that would nullify the salah. It would invalidate the prayer to talk in prayer. If your phone is ringing loudly during the salah, you have to silence your phone. You cannot say, I can't do any movement, so I'm going to let my phone ring and distract everybody else. No, you have to silence your phone. This is actually what's advocated by the scholars across the madhahib. If your phone is distracting everyone else in the jama'ah, that one movement that you're doing to silence your phone is necessary. It's necessary. The same way it's necessary to do certain things in salah, like protect a child from harm, or protect your belongings from being stolen. This is something that affects all the other musallin, so we have to be very considerate to Allah. But talking during the khutbah, answering the phone, or during the salah is a nullifier, Wallahu a'lam. Yes. Yeah, of course. I mean, so the question is, many times we download Quran, audio or Quran in general, and then we delete it. If anybody says it's prohibited, which is a huge statement, that would be like, that would have so many harmful implications. If somebody says you're not allowed to delete any Quran audio off your phone for the rest of your phone's life, your phone won't last, first of all. Anything related to general matters is basically permissible unless somebody proves it's prohibited, right? So al-asl, the default is that al-ibaha, it's permissible to delete Quran audio off your phone. Yeah, and maybe I'll download something else or more Quran later. Maybe I have no storage left on my phone, right? So I can no longer use this device. So there's no prohibition, there should be no prohibition of deleting a Quran app or Quran audio, because it's again binary, zeros and ones. It's not like you're affecting the Quran, the actual speech of Allah in any way. And this is in agreement with the other two questions about what is the Quran app in terms of fiqh rulings on phones and devices. It's not the mushaf. It's just binary, wallahu a'lam. Khair, inshallah. I don't see any other questions, comments. Yes, Sheikh. Jazakallah khair. That's a great reminder. So some people, maybe some people here as well, the ringtone is set as, let's say, the adhan or an ayah from the Quran or a dua or dhikr and so on and so forth. Is that permissible? Some scholars say it's not from the etiquette of the Quran to have an ayah of the Quran playing like that and then to interrupt it and have to answer. And the funny thing is, we say this and then somebody says, I'm going to let the whole thing like play out and I'm not going to answer the phone. Then what's the point of the ringtone, right? The whole point was to, hear. But if you say, I want to be reminded, then there's a solution for that. And those are the dhikr apps or the reminder dhikr apps that remind you, read, a couple ayats of Quran. Or remember today to do your daily wird. Remember to make dua and dhikr. It should not be, or it's better not to be, a ringtone, wallahu alam, because the Quran was brought down. The Quran was brought down as revelation for hidayah, for shifa, for happiness, for guidance, and so on and so forth. It should not be something we interrupt all the time. So it's better to stay away from it if it's a doubtful matter, wallahu alam. It's better to stay away from the doubtful matters. Allah knows best. Was that the adhan of Isha I heard a few times? Speaking of adhan going off, one last thing I'll mention. There was a masjid I went to once that had a TV up and it had only one thing on it. I think it said, when I got there for Jum'ah, it said 27 days since the last ringtone interruption. Okay, I don't know about this masjid and like how many times ringtones go off in Salah. Like on average, maybe once a week or maybe once a day or maybe once 100 times a day. I don't know. They said 27, I think 27 days or something like ridiculously high. And I'm like, man, mashallah, that's amazing. Is this updated? Like you guys update it? And they looked at each other and they're like, yeah, it's pretty updated. I said, okay, that's great. SubhanAllah, we start the Jum'ah khutbah and 3 phones go off in that Jum'ah khutbah. And they reset it. They said like 0 days since the last phone interruption. Just be cautious and considerate of people around you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to use these phones in beneficial ways and protect us from any kind of harm. And please, if you're somebody who texts and drives or jokingly drives and texts, please don't do it. Your life is worth more than that. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserve us and increase us in goodness and grant us the best of this life and the best of the next life. And we ask Allah to forgive us for any of our shortcomings. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in wa jazakumullahu khairan. Adhan?
Jazakumullah khair, Sheikh Suleiman. Excellent discussion on cell phones. Inshallah, what we'll do is we'll have the adhan, and immediately after the adhan, we're going to have a presentation by our partners from Wahid Invest, inshallah. As Jawad to come and make the adhan, inshallah.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة، حي على الصلاة، حي على الفلاح، حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
Jazakumullah khair, Jawad. So we'd like to ask Salahuddin Nasruddin to come up. He is the marketing manager at Wahid Invest, and he'll talk about Wahid Invest. But just a quick thing to note: Sheikh Yasir Qadi is one of the individuals who's behind this project, and we all know Sheikh Yasir Qadi and his position inside our communities. But we'd like to ask Brother Salahuddin to come up, inshallah. We all know him. And we know his brother Alimuddin Nasruddin, who was inside our community. And then moved to Dallas. So inshallah, he's going to be talking to us. He's our sponsor for today's program, inshallah.
Jazakumullah khairan. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wassalatu wassalam. Thank you very much for the opportunity. And for all the Apple users out there, there is a screen time app that you can, it comes by default to let you know how much you're using your cell phone. Just by a raise of hands, how many of you would give your child a loaded gun? Would any one of you give your child, or any one of you live with a loaded gun? Well, that's what you're doing when you give a child a cell phone. It's a loaded gun. That's what I tell my kids. I'm not going to give you a loaded gun, so live and stay alive. With that said, I just want to say today was not the best day to talk about Wahid Invest, because Wahid Invest is a digital platform for investing. It's a digital halal platform for investing, and it has an app. And like many other things that phones have replaced, it is also replacing how you invest. And as Muslims, there's tons of apps that we can use for our daily activities, to express and to manifest our deen. And Wahid Invest is an app that can do just that. Wahid Invest, for you who may not know, and I know some of you in the audience have downloaded the app and have been using it actively for your investment. What Wahid does is when you download the app or you go on our website, it asks a few questions. Upon answering those questions, the app will determine for you or recommend for you a portfolio. That portfolio is made up of US equities, US stocks, many companies that many of you might be working at that are halal. Just like in our daily lives, there's good things to do and there's bad things that we can do. What our app has done is to remove all the companies that are not Sharia compliant. And the Sharia compliant rules, of course, are made up by international bodies, and it's maintained and audited by our own Sharia compliance board, which is, of course, made up of many of you know Yasir Qadi and others. There's a lot to be said about the app and how to invest, and we have a table at the back. You can come and meet us and talk a little bit more about what we do. But I just wanted to emphasize the fact that just like cell phone is not haram, is how you use it. Investing is not haram. Investing and growing your wealth and wealth creation is something that is the Prophet did, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He encouraged it. So alhamdulillah, Wahid has made it easy, simple, and affordable. We are the lowest priced investing product in the industry, as low as 0.49% on your account. So there's a lot of details, of course. I don't want to get too lengthy here. We have Asia to go to, but I'm at the back there. Brother Rihat Manan is our New York representative, and he's here to also talk and answer questions. Jazakumullah khairan. And while Wahid might be the last word, I think Sheikh Hani topic today is of critical importance. Parents, please, you pay these bills for these phones. You can stop pay them too. You know, and I've seen families damaged by phone, and I've seen families that has enhanced their living with cell phones. Be in the group that's enhancing their family lives, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. And we are at the back here if you ever need to talk to me about Wahid. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Jazakumullah khair. So we have a couple of minutes before Isha. Isha is at 8:15, inshallah. So you guys can hang out. And then after Isha, we're going to have dinner. Jazakumullah khair. You guys can meet the Sheikh and interact with the Sheikh. Jazakumullah khair.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. A very quick reminder. By the way, I had no idea that Wahid Investment was here. A very quick reminder. We look at the many scholars of our times and throughout history as well. And we find that, and I teach a class, for example, about Imam Muslim rahimahullah. One of the most interesting things people don't know about Imam Muslim rahimahullah is that he had a source of passive income. What was this from? He had land in Naysabur that he would use as basically a source of transactions and produce and things that people would manage and sell for him. So he was benefiting from his real estate. This gave him the ability with his time to do the things that he really wanted to do. And this is one of the things that as Muslims, in my class, this is something we teach often, and I'm actually really glad that Wahid is here. Looking as Muslims and as a community and teaching our children the importance of having or being financially savvy and using our wealth to expand and extend our wealth so that we can benefit our communities and our ummah, and in our time, free up more of our active time so that we are with our family, so that we are connected to seeking knowledge, so that we are with the community more. We take every opportunity we can, especially when you find an opportunity, of high caliber, and it is relevant, and it is necessary, and it is beneficial, and it is something that is, as you've seen from many of the scholars who endorsed it and advise on the board of advisories, it is something we should consider all the time. And I'm not, by the way, I have absolutely zero affiliation, and brother can attest, to Wahid Investments. But the reason I say this, as somebody who loves business and loves investments, and this is something I do all the time, and it's on the side with many partners and investors and friends and consultants and so on and so forth. It is important for us to always expand our horizons, especially with services like this. So do try to consider at least passing by and seeing what they're about. If it's not for you, pass it on to somebody else who might be interested in investing, wallahu alam. So I just had to add that quick note. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Feel free to meet them at the back. Wahid Invest, inshallah.